Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I'm Jude Sandval, and this is Strategic Defense, the operational briefing for fathers who refuse to be sidelined by a system that exploits drift and unpreparedness. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. While a lawyer handles your legal rights, I serve as your guide through the decision gap to protect your actual role as a father. You are now entering the command center. Today's briefing begins now. Hello, dads, and welcome back to this week's briefing. Last week, we pulled the pin on a conversation that most people in the family law industry, the attorneys, the therapists, the evaluators, really wish we would not have. We talked about what I described as the silver bullet. In the back rooms of this multi-billion-dollar machine, it's known as the nuclear option because of its power to instantly and permanently derail a father's life. This isn't a casual legal disagreement. It is the systematic, calculated use of false allegations, unsubstantiated claims of abuse, neglect, or domestic violence to erase a father from his children's lives in one single surgical move. It's a strategic strike designed to disorient and destabilize you. It's intended to leave you in a state of disbelief where you're questioning your own reality while the system hauls you out of your home, restricts your access to your kids, and freezes your assets before a single fact is even tested in court. The industry actors don't like us talking about this because the silver bullet works precisely through its immediate devastating impact. Research shows that parents who have already been separated from their children are 86% more likely to face these manufactured claims. This isn't about justice. It's a blitzkrieg where the process itself becomes the punishment, creating a psychological fallout for fathers that studies have compared to the trauma experienced by war veterans. Last week was about naming the demon. Today is about the counteroffensive. How do you immediately neutralize a lie? How do you pivot from being a defensive victim to being the strategic leader of your own case? We're going to dive deep into the mechanisms of the counter move. Since last week's episode dropped, the response hasn't just been high, it's been seismic. Our inbox was overflowing this week with dads who saw the writing on the wall, men who realized that the person they used to trust is now executing a calculated playbook to dismantle their lives. There was a record number of you that went and took the strategic risk assessment at the website. There was a record number that scheduled a strategic risk consultation, and a record number that showed up to our tactical group briefing on Saturday. Why? I think because many of you last week was the first time the mirage of the quote unquote amicable divorce evaporated. You realized that the peace she was selling you was never a peace treaty. It was a strategic setup designed to keep you unrepresented and docile while she positioned her pieces for a total wipeout. I think that many of you realized that every time you chose flexibility or accommodation to lower the temperature, you weren't being a good guy. You were inviting strategic drift, slowly leaking your parental authority and influence until you were one tactical error away from becoming a weekend visitor. So you've been walking through a high-stakes legal minefield without a map, gentlemen. And many of you, I think, just realized your foot is on a live pressure plate. So if you're feeling that cold pit in your stomach, it's okay. If you've realized you are firmly in the crosshairs of a silver bullet strike, I just need you to take a deliberate breath. You're not alone, but you're officially finished with hope as a strategy. Hope is what gets great fathers erased from their children's lives. Today, We're moving from the why into the how. We are shifting the tempo and the direction of this mission. How do you immediately neutralize a manufactured lie before it calcifies into a permanent court order? How do you pivot from being a defensive victim of her playbook to being the strategic leader and primary commander of your own case? We're going deep into the mechanics of the counteroffensive, analyzing exactly how to manage the decision gap between court dates where the real war for your kids is won or lost. It's time to stop the drift, bridge the lawyer gap, and reclaim your role with grounded integrity. Now, I know some of you dads that are listening, and we got some emails this week about feeling uncomfortable about the fact that we're contextualizing this as a battle. But I need you to know, guys, that this is a battle. What I've come to realize here is that just supporting you in this is watching you systematically lose your parental authority with your parents. And the guys that have shown up in the community that have taken this information and learned from it and implemented it have had the best outcomes, where they have been able to ensure their parental authority and keep having time and parenting time with their kiddos. So I want you, if you're thinking about this, and this will be 95% of you are not going to end up in court, which is fine and terrific, which is what we want to avoid. But you also do need to know what the potential pitfalls are and the strategy around this and the lay of the land in the courts so that you can effectively go through this. I can't tell you the number of times, and this comes from even clients who are attorneys. They're not family law attorneys, but they're corporate attorneys, they're real estate attorneys, they're estate attorneys, and they say, I had no idea how family law and family court worked, and I'm an attorney, and I was represented, and I got screwed. So I'm just sharing, gentlemen, with you what I've been able to decode over the 13 years of being in this process. Oh, it's over 13 years now of being in this process. And the best way to describe that and the analogies that I can make is in this battle war kind of mindset. So I understand lots of you emailed like, I'm uncomfortable with this. I don't know if that's true. Like, I don't want to go to battle. I don't want to fight late, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, I know we don't want to, but when it comes to your kids, you have to step up as a father in order to protect them. The best thing that they can have is a father that is active and present in their lives, and you may just have to fight for that. All right. Before we look at the immediate tactics of the counteroffensive, we have to look at the cold math that makes you a victim before you even open your mouth. If you missed last week, lock in right now because I'm going to give you a review. And this is the foundational logic of the system that is currently processing you. Lots of dads come to me and they say the same thing. I'm a good dad. I've never laid a hand on anyone. Once the judge hears the truth, they'll see she's lying. That belief is a tactical death sentence for your case, dads. You're walking into a civil arena with a criminal court mindset. In a criminal trial, you have the shield of needing clear and convincing evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. The state needs to be 99% certain to take your freedom. But family court doesn't give a dang about absolute truth. It operates on a standard called a preponderance of evidence. I call this the 51% rule. Think about a standard balance scale, right? Like the legal system one, ironically. If your wife, soon to be ex, puts a mountain of lies on one side and you put nothing but hope for the truth or justice on the other, the scale hits the floor. But here's the reality. She doesn't even need a mountain. She just needs the weight of a single feather more than you have. If the judge is 51% convinced that her narrative is more likely than not to be true, you lose. Your children, your home, and your reputation are being decided by a 1% margin. You have to understand the human being in this black robe. They're not looking for justice in family court in the way that you see it in the movies on Law and Order or on CSI. They're managing a docket that is running at 120% capacity. They're looking for risk management. When a false allegation hits, the judge doesn't have the time or the investigative staff to be Sherlock Holmes. That's why they have all these third parties that we'll talk about later that they take cover under. They switch into safeguard mode to minimize liability. They would rather sideline a fit, innocent father who's likely not going to fight back for 6 months out of an abundance of caution than risk being the judge on the news because a child got hurt on their watch. This basically is the judicial philosophy of where there's smoke, there's fire. Even if you are eventually exonerated, even if the CPS finds the claim unfounded, the water is already muddied. That 1% of lingering doubt becomes a permanent stain, a jaundiced view, if you will, that the court carries for the rest of your case. When the system defaults to efficiency and risk avoidance, it leaves a vacuum where outdated cultural biases and assumptions about default parents fill that 1% gap for the judge. If you aren't the primary strategist, moving that needle yourself through meticulous, undeniable documentation, the machine will process you right out of your kids' lives. This, dads, is the cold math of your fatherhood. And if you don't master it, you're already a weekend visitor.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, dads, Jude here. I'm pausing this conversation for a mission-critical warning. Everything we discuss on this podcast only works if you have a role to return to. Most fathers don't lose their kids in court. They lose ground quietly through drift and decisions made under pressure. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Stop the drift today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the free weekend visitor risk assessment or book your fatherhood protection session. Your kids are counting on you. Now, back to the show.
So let's talk about the moment the ambush is actually sprung. That flashpoint where the ground doesn't just shift, it vanishes. Maybe it's a CPS investigator standing on your porch at 8 p.m. with a clipboard, or a process server handing you an ex parte restraining order that hauls you out of your home based on an allegation fabricated just hours ago. This is the start of your mission critical window. We're going to use the language here. The high-speed version of the decision gap where your long-term influence as a father is either saved through discipline or it's going to be lost through the strategic drift. In this window, most fathers commit tactical suicide because they're in a state of absolute cognitive dissonance, questioning their own reality while a calculated strike is being executed against them. Your human instincts, dads, men listening, is to fix the misunderstanding. This is just our default. You want to explain, you want to reason, and you want to call her and ask, if you're a nice guy like I was, or like a lot of you who show up in the community, how could you do this to our family? You must accept that reason, quote unquote reason, is a currency that has been decommissioned in this relationship. You're no longer dealing with a spouse. You're dealing with a strategic actor executing a scorched earth playbook. And I'm telling you, friends, this is not an understatement. Panic is the worst thing for you to do. Panic is the primary oxygen that this silver bullet strategy relies on to burn your life to the ground. When you panic, you react. And in family court, in the family court, the system is built on that 51% preponderance of evidence, right? Your reaction effectively becomes her evidence. I'll say that again. Because the family court system is built on a 51% preponderance of evidence, remember, it is very low and that can tip very easily. Your reaction effectively becomes her evidence. So the second that you maybe fire off that text message about how you can lie, you're a psycho, and you're defending your honor, that is not going to play well. And in the eyes of an overworked judge looking for this risk management, you're exactly the aggressive and unstable threat she claimed you were. You just handed her maybe a smoking gun she didn't have 5 minutes ago. Your need to be heard is her most effective trap. And this is really, really hard for us, especially those of us that are good dads and get blindsided by this. You're walking into it is how great, and walking into it is how great fathers are processed into these weekend visitors, right? Don't let that shock become the permanent reality of being that weekend visitor, okay? Your action plan has to start. Now, we're still talking about essentially what we talked about last week. The action plan starts with the law enforcement script. Oftentimes, these false allegations are going to involve some sort of law enforcement involvement. So it's going to be a false allegation of abuse, of child abuse, of whatever it might be. Our biological response is, like I said before, is to try to figure things out, right? And our response to a police officer on our porch is an adrenaline dump that screams for us to defend our honor. You have to ignore that instinct. If the police show up, you must understand that that officer is not a neutral investigator. They are a system actor trained in the psychology of human behavior to push past your hesitation and obtain a statement. By the time they knock, they have likely already spoken to the accuser and arrived at a preliminary conclusion that you are the primary aggressor. And in family court, gentlemen, you are guilty until proven innocent. Remember? Guilty until proven innocent. So these law enforcement individuals are legally permitted to lie to you, use rapport building to lower your guard, or suggest that just clearing things up will help you. And the problem, dads, because you are good guys, is this is the ultimate good guy trap, right? I'll describe those three again to you. Legally permitted to lie to you, rapport building to lower your guard, and suggesting that clearing things up will help you. All things good guys want to do, right? We just want to just help out and figure it out, and just, if we tell the truth will prevail, right? Your defense starts with this law enforcement script, and it must be delivered with absolute surgical precision. Use this exact language, write it down, pause this, and script it out and put it in your phone in case you need it. Even guys where you think that you're not going to need this. Look, I can't tell you the number of times I've talked with guys and I'm like, hey, this language is dangerous that I'm hearing. You need to be aware. You're at a high risk situation. The risk level is getting higher. This is why, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, we'll be fine. Like, we've had these problems before, And then the next thing you know, they're in jail or there's an ex parte order. Okay. So even if you don't think you need this, guys, I want you to put it in your phone and write it down. Officer, I'm happy to cooperate with your presence, but I am choosing to exercise my right to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney before answering any question. I'm going to say it again. Officer, and look, you're not being a dick. They might prompt you to say something. They might make fun of you. They might do something. They might do the rapport building, some of those things that I said before. Simply, officer, I'm happy to cooperate with your presence, right? That's what you're cooperating. They're there for a reason. They were called, an allegation. They have to do their job. You are cooperating with their presence. Officer, I'm happy to cooperate with your presence, but I am choosing to exercise my right to remain silent, and I want to speak to my attorney before answering any questions, right? You're cooperating with their presence. You're not cooperating with the investigation, okay? Because you need an attorney to help you through that process. This is direct. It's unambiguous phrasing. It is the only way to create a record that actually stops interrogation. Saying, maybe I should talk to a lawyer or I don't think I should talk is legally insufficient and allows them to continue questioning you, okay? So use the script. And once you invoke this right, the most dangerous part begins, gentlemen. You must shut up. Be silent. Say nothing else. In this high-stakes environment of a domestic dispute, anything you say after this script, even harmless small talk about the weather or asking how the kids look, can be interpreted by a court as you voluntarily waiving your constitutional protections. Every word, every sigh, every facial expression is going to be documented in a detailed report that will be used to pathologize your demeanor to a family court judge who is already looking for smoke. Do not allow them inside your home without a warrant. Keep your hands visible. Do not attempt to help them understand your side. 51 preponderance system. Remember, an officer's report stating you are uncooperative or agitated is just as lethal as a confession, okay? But silence is not an admission of guilt. It's your tactical armor. Again, silence is not an admission of guilt. It is tactical armor. I just had a client go through this where the officer absolutely destroyed him with all this stuff. I'm basically taking a bunch of what I'm describing here today from his case. Now, I had lots of other clients that have gone through this, but his case was textbook of this. He wanted to help out. He was offering information. He was like trying to do everything, and it absolutely backfired. And he ended up in court, and everything said that, and he even pulled the body cam footage to dispute the report that was written that was so biased. Like it's absolutely critical that if you get into this situation, and I pray that you don't, that you follow this script. Okay. Next is establishing your tactical perimeter is what I'm calling it. Communication lockdown. From the second that this false allegation happens forward, direct contact with your wife is dead. Stop. No more. If it isn't through a court-approved app like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents, it did not happen. You have to understand that every casual text you send or quick phone call you take is a blank canvas for her to paint you as a monster. She'll bait you, wait for a single word out of place, and then take screenshots of those words to show the judge. I've seen it happen probably hundreds of times at this point. Don't answer the phone. Definitely don't step inside for a second during a transition or a handoff to talk about the kids. Even if after, once this false allegation happens, fellas, you've got to completely transform your mindset. This is the nuclear option, okay? Your mindset has got to completely change. So even if you get parenting time back, or if there hasn't been a change in parenting time, the amicable stops, right? You're not stepping in for a second to talk about the kids during a handoff. Like that all stops, okay? That second is where she will later claim you trapped her in her kitchen or threatened her. I just had one come up this week that they squared up, that he squared up and threatened her. Like, I mean, I'm telling you, it gets crazy. So just stop. You got to assume that every interaction is being recorded and scripted with the sole purpose of pathologizing your behavior to a family court judge who is already looking for smoke. While you are locking down that perimeter, you need to step into a new role. That is the lead investigator of your own life. And this, guys, this is going to be where this is going to be probably a second job, a part-time job for you. You're no longer just going to be dad, okay? And not just working your regular job, and just a dad. You're the architect of the forensic. All right, slow down for a sec, Jude. You're the architect of the forensic paper trail that is going to save your role as a father. You start a contemporaneous journal right then and there. This isn't a journal like diary of your feelings journal. It is a log of objective facts. One of the things I talk about with guys and coach with guys is creating charts based off of this to give to their attorneys to show the behavior that their wife is exhibiting. That makes it easier for their attorney to argue in court. It's incredibly valuable and important. You're logging where were you at 6 p.m. on Tuesday? Who was with you? Did you buy gas? Did you use your credit card? Digital evidence, one of your most lethal weapons, because it's the only thing the system respects more than a narrative. In the 51 preponderance system, your word is a coin flip, but location data is a fact. If she files an emergency motion claiming you harassed her at the park, and your phone's GPS data and a timestamped gym receipt show you were 5 miles away, that allegation doesn't just fail. It backfires with nuclear force. It exposes her playbook, destroys her credibility, and moves the needle back in your favor. So what you're doing with this journal is you're building a mountain of objective reality that a lie cannot claim. Can't climb. Okay, now we have to deal with the professionals, the ones who step into your life when that silver bullet is fired. In these high conflict cases, in many jurisdictions, the court will very almost certainly appoint a guardian ad litem. Not always. Some will do it automatically. Or they might order, or you potentially might want to consider getting a full-scale custody evaluations. Now, sometimes dads I talk to view these as the enemy and as intruders coming to judge their worth. Now, that can be the case, but I want you to keep a little bit of an open mind and flip that script a little bit right now. And I want you to view these professionals as potentially your greatest tactical opportunity to provide a neutral perspective that destroys her narrative. I say that, though, with the caveat that you have to manage them with surgical precision. Again, the courts overworked, don't have the ability, have the preponderance of evidence, want these third parties to weigh in because it gives them cover. And so in using them for cover, then you have to try to work with them especially if they're court ordered. You're not going to have a choice. Now, whether you get a full evaluation is a strategic thing that you can work on with your attorney. Sometimes that's not beneficial. Sometimes it is. But regardless, you have to manage any of these third parties with surgical precision. Understand the landscape here first, guys. Family court is a niche industry. It's a cottage industry of lawyers, of evaluators, of therapists, and they all live in this self-sustaining ecosystem. You've heard me talk about this before if you've listened to more than one podcast here. They see each other at the same conferences. They rely on each other for professional referrals and references. They all have their own life. They all have their mortgages to pay, their car payments to pay, their kiddos in school, etc. And so in this club, none of them are going to stick their neck out for a dad who shows up looking like a hot mess. and they're not really going to, at any point, and even your attorney, burn down the house in order to prove your point and win, quote unquote, win your case, right? So if you walk into an interview with any one of these individuals leaking emotion or vibrating with anger or appearing unhinged, you are not a victim to them. You are immediately a risk that needs to be managed for the sake of the system's efficiency. And I can speak with, I can speak to this with personal experience around even just getting into a heated exchange with one of these individuals because of what they're doing. I mean, it's insane the power that they have. And it's so much easier for that professional to just say, oh, yeah, he has anger issues, or yeah, he has, he's mentally, emotionally unstable, or he presents as unstable, et cetera, especially dads when we are in the role of fighting for our children, right? This is important to us. We are going to get elevated emotions. We have to learn how to manage and deal with this. So your professional engagement strategy starts with being the calmest person in every single room you enter. This is your most lethal weapon. When you meet with an investigator or a gal or an integration therapist or whomever it is, do not spend a single second bad-mouthing your ex. That's just rule number one. Never, ever, once, right? Identifying behaviors, talking about behaviors, something different. Bad-mouthing, do not do. You know she's a pathological liar, okay? And you know she's trying to erase you. But the second you start an aggressive rant about her, the evaluator's pen hits the paper and they document high conflict and mutual instability, right? They're going to default to the path of least resistance always. They stop looking at her lies and they start looking at your volatility. You cannot win a he said, she said in a 51% system by being the louder voice. Let me say that one again, because that's important for us dads. You cannot win a he said, she said in a 51% system by being the louder voice. You win by being the more credible adult. That's how you do it. Instead, you force these professionals to look at facts by becoming locked in on the kids. Talk about their specific school projects, talk about the exact name of their pediatrician, describe their favorite hobbies and the subtle ways they handle stress. Show the evaluator your contemporaneous log of doctor's appointments, parent-teacher conferences, extracurricular events. When you show up with data and a child-centered heart, which I know all of you have, it's just the emotions that will potentially get in your way of demonstrating that child-centered heart. When you're able to do that, when you're able to show up with the data and the child-centered heart combined, you make that professional's job easier. You become the stable baseline that makes her erratic behavior stand out like a flare in the sky. Now, if the lies are deep, if she is weaponizing a personality disorder to manipulate the process, you need to run the counteroffensive by moving for a forensic psychological evaluation. So let's get into detail on this, because a lot of guys won't do this, and it is absolutely critical. High conflict personalities usually stem from some sort of mental emotional issue and or even a personality disorder. Okay? High conflict personalities are often very charming also. And in persuasive and they're also very persuasive in short 30-minute bursts or casual contact. But what they cannot hide is their manipulative patterns under the crushing weight of a standardized clinical testing. And I'm talking about instruments like MMPI-2 or the MCMI-4. These tests have what are called built-in validity scales like the L scale and the K scale. When someone tries to fake good to look like the perfect parents. These scales identify the underreporting and the defensiveness. So it's very, very critical that you utilize something like this. Yes, it's going to be time consuming. Yes, your attorney's probably going to say, yeah, we shouldn't do this because it takes more time on their part. It's going to cost you more. It's going to be more time consuming and take more management, but it can be absolutely critical in defending yourself. So hang with me, guys. Coming to wrap this up. I know this has been long, but this is all critical, and this stems from last week because you guys overwhelmingly wanted more information on this. So I feel it's my duty to give you the how in dealing with these false allegations. So let's continue. By inviting this neutral professional into the room early and maybe getting some of these tests and submitting to that forensic scrutiny. Look, see, here's the thing also to understand. I don't want to get too much on tangent. I want to stick to the script, but also by you submitting to this forensic scrutiny, this is the worst thing for somebody that's a high conflict personality, because they probably will have some underlying mental emotional issue. They do not want that forensic scrutiny. So you're submitting it to it yourself because you know you're okay and you're grounded. They're not going to like it. Okay. So the other thing you're doing then is you're forcing the system to examine objective data, right? So instead of her narrative and listening to her narrative and allowing that narrative to have time to calcify in the judge's mind, you're forcing the system to look at objective data, right? So that gets rid of some of that narrative that can work against you. And if an evaluator finds that her claims are unsubstantiated, guys, that doesn't just clear your name, it nukes her credibility potentially for the entire divorce. Now, just know that individuals that go this route usually aren't going to stop at this first escalation. So it might not entirely nuke her credibility for the entire divorce because she's going to come up with another one and another one, and another one. Okay. But the thing is, you're not just defending your role, you're exposing that playbook. And so you do it once, next one comes, you do it again, right? And then you can render this silver bullet useless, at least for the rest of this war, this battle, right? You may have to do it again, but that's how you do it. Finally, I got to take a breath and a sip of water here. All right. Finally, we need to talk about the theater of operations to the courtroom. You need to understand one thing clearly. Playing defense in a high conflict divorce is a slow death. If you only sit back and parry her blows, you are surrendering the tempo of the mission and allowing her to dictate the terms of your future. And dads, this is for you, dads. This was me. This is what happened. I gave up. I didn't want to destroy. I didn't want to go aggressively against things. And it cost me an extra decade in court with somebody that was not ever going to stop unless the court stopped her from doing it. And until I decoded and figured out how to utilize it and how to do exactly what I'm describing today in order to mitigate all of what she was doing. Okay. And so I know this is probably going to be uncomfortable. Hearing it is going to be uncomfortable for you. One of the things that we talked about on a call this weekend, though, with the guys that were uncomfortable with this, is that there's something that changes when somebody is attacking your children. And I need you to reframe this as taking you out of their lives is an attack on them directly. The single greatest thing that is an indicator of them growing up to be healthy, functioning adults is a father, an active and present father in their lives. By somebody trying to erase you out of your children's lives, they are directly attacking your life. When you think of it that way, there is something that changes. There was something in me that changed that made me finally decide that I needed to go and I needed to do something. I needed to change that mindset. So you have to execute a calculated aggressive counteroffensive. Doesn't mean that you have to change who you are as a good person, as a good dad, as a nice guy, but you have to be strategic and you have to be calculated and you have to implement an aggressive counteroffensive. And then if you have the data, the receipts, the GPS logs, the witness statements that prove she knowingly weaponized a manufactured lie to CPS or the police, you don't just let it go. You just don't hope that it'll just go away or that everything will work out okay or just for the sake of peace. Chasing peace at the expense of your authority is an invitation for further abuse. You need to instruct your attorney, and listen to this one carefully, guys, because this is one that rarely I see happen. You need to instruct your attorney to file for sanctions, contempt, or perjury, whatever it might be, so that there is accountability. Most of you are too nice for this. I know that. Me too. You're still operating under the delusion that if you just act reasonable, she'll eventually see the light and you can get back to normal. You're going to have to wake up. The woman you married is gone and normal has been decommissioned. This 51% preponderance system, there are no consequences for a silver bullet strike. She has every incentive to keep firing until you are erased. That's why I said it's going to continue to escalate. Filing for these sanctions isn't about being mean. It's not about being vindictive. It's about establishing a tactical cost for her gamesmanship. When the court orders her to pay your attorney's fees or issues a finding of bad faith conduct, it signals to the judge and to her that the playbook has been exposed and that the smoke in the room is of her own making, not yours. Okay. Now, you must seize this window of exoneration with critical precision. This is the next step. The very second a CPS investigation is closed in your favor or a temporary order or a temporary restraining order is dismissed, you don't exhale, you don't sit back, and you don't wait for the system to reward you. I'm telling you, nobody's going to come and give you any high fives. You have to strike. You need to immediately move for temporary orders that reflect your true involvement and demand at least 50-50 status quo. Don't wait for a final trial that is 6 or 12 months away. Why? Because there will be more it's not going to be a silver bullet anymore, but there's going to be more attempts at trying to discredit you. The patterns you set during this window now by moving for temporary orders, getting at least 50-50 and setting your parenting time is going to be the patterns you set that the judge will eventually copy and paste into your final degree, okay? As opposed to waiting for a final trial for 6 or 12 or even more months long and battling back and forth about parenting time and then maybe even dealing with parental alienation or any innumerable other things that could come up that she's going to hit you with. When the court sees that you were the victim of a coordinated character assassination and yet you remain stable, consistent, child-focused leader throughout the chaos, that narrative that she was trying to pin on you flips. You aren't just the dad anymore. You're the only parent the court can actually trust to prioritize the children over the conflict. Reclaim your role the moment the lie dies. Let me say that phrase again. Reclaim your role the moment the lie dies. Your kids are counting on you to lead them out of the rubble. And that's what we do as dads. All right, gentlemen, this has been another very heavy episode. I know last week it was a lot shorter, but the outcry was huge. So I wanted to expand upon this. I know for many of you, it's the first time you've been told the truth about this system without a filter. The silver bullet isn't just a legal tactic. It is a psychological blitzkrieg. I'm telling you, it's a nightmare scenario. And it's designed to separate you from your home, your assets, and your soul before a single fact is ever tested in a courtroom. But Here's the non-negotiable reality you need to internalize. Take this away. It is a beatable nightmare, provided you do not act like a victim and you act like or begin acting like the commander of your case. You have to understand that the family court machine is optimized for administrative efficiency and institutional risk management, not for the sanctity of your parental bond. It does not care about your internal goodness, and it holds zero reverence for the fact that you've been a devoted present father for the last 10 years or however many years. In this system built on a 51% preponderance of evidence, the objective truth is secondary to the legal narrative. This system only rewards three things: critical preparation, undeniable documented pattern, and the absolute mastery of high conflict emotional restraint. I recapped this foundation today because you cannot fight a war if you don't understand the geography of the battlefield. When a false allegation is fired, the niche industry of evaluators, therapists, and investigators will not stick their necks out to save you. They will look for the path of least resistance to stabilize the conflict and move to the next file. If you aren't the one providing the forensic paper trail to overwhelm that 51% threshold, the system will default to the mother almost every single time. So if you sense the ground shifting, if you suspect a false allegation is being manufactured in the dark, and if a process or, I hope to God, a process server has already landed a tactical strike on your doorstep, do not guess. And I hope that hasn't happened to you, and I hope that it won't. But do not wait and see if she'll come to her senses. Waiting and seeing is the path of strategic grit drift that turns great fathers into weekend visitors. You need to close that decision gap immediately. So I mentioned the risk assessment, risk consultation. Go to thedivorcedadvocate.com right now. I've created this weekend visitor risk assessment for you. You need to identify your high stakes exposure zones before the system exploits them and finalizes your erasure. It's going to take 10 minutes or less for you to go through this. It's going to give you immediate results and tell you where you're at on all of these different categories. And then you can book your strategic risk consultation with me. We'll sit down in the war room and map out your strategic defense blueprint piece by piece. We're going to build that forensic paper trail required to ensure that her manufacturer lies and your reactive mistakes don't become your permanent legal reality. Your children, dads, don't need a man who tries to be amicable while his life is being systematically dismantled. They need a father who leads with grounded integrity and protects his role for the long haul. This isn't just about a lawsuit or a divorce or being in court. It's about your name, your reputation, and your legacy. Gentlemen, your kids are counting on you to stay in this fight. So stay sharp, stay disciplined, and as always, stay strong. Thank you so much for listening. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope that you found value in this today. If you have, send us messages. Also, leave us a star rating, or even better, give us a comment on whatever platform you're listening to, or share this on social media. The social media is starting to really expand. That's a really, really helpful place, guys. If you can go Instagram, Facebook, X, we're everywhere now, and share this on social media. It spreads like wildfire. Get more dads in to hear this information and learn. Thank you so much. God bless.
This concludes today's briefing. Remember, in the family court system, intelligence without execution is liability. Ground is lost quietly during the decision gap between your court hearings. Being unprepared is how great fathers become weekend visitors. I ensure your mistakes don't become your permanent reality. Secure your role today at thedivorcedadvocate.com. Take the weekend visitor risk assessment to identify your exposure, or book your private fatherhood protection system. Stay strong. Your kids are counting on you.